welcome everybody to the very best panel of the day. So congratulations for making good choices. You made the right choice. Welcome. It's smart and thoughtful that you are here, and you are clearly better than the other people in the other rooms. I can already tell. So thanks for being here. And my name is Bill Olson. I'm the principal of Noble Street College Prep in Chicago. We're going to do some intros first. We're going to, and the diversity of experiences and kind of approaches in this panel are phenomenal. You're getting education from lots of different ways. The committee, let's give them a hand for putting this together, because they really got a heavy-hitting group. And so we'll just start off at the end, and we'll kind of do a real quick introductions, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Hi, I'm Ben Potts. I'm Ben Potts. I'm the principal of Notre Dame Catholic School in Michigan City, Indiana. Should I say more? Or?
Do you want a career path?
I think, a little bit of career path. Let's
Sure.
do that, because I think, what brings you here?
Sure, absolutely. The reason, I have degrees from University of Chicago and Harvard, and the people in my little world say, why are you in education? For me, and my generation, which I'm 28 years old, I became principal at the age of 25, it was September 11, 2001. For my generation, early adolescence, I was in band class at that time in high school, and adolescence is marked by trying to make sense of the world. That event defines my part of the generation. And what I came to understand, thinking about that over time, going to University of Chicago, seeing the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, is that the people who were involved in 9/11 learned to do what they did. They learned to fly planes. They learned how to take down institutions. They had massive economic backing. If people can learn to do something that terrible, how much more can they learn to do something that good? And that's why I'm involved in faith-based education.
That was awesome.
So I am that Sesame Street song, one of these things doesn't belong here? I am that thing, because I'm not an educator. I came to education policy, Sue Swenson, Minnesotan, came to the University of Chicago in 1971 through a program called the Grassroots Talent Search, which was reaching out to little towns. Came as a math major, became a humanities major, studied as much as I could possibly manage with Richard McKeon. Raise your hand if you know who Richard McKeon is. Dude, otherwise, shame on the college. Really, you need to figure that out, because he was a powerhouse behind the Hutchins College. He did amazing things in the college, but he was also, at one time, president of every major philosophical organization in the world, and he did the survey of philosophers that became the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, of human rights. So we need to do a better job at reaching out to you on that stuff. Anyway, that's where I am. I have a master's degree from Chicago as well as the BA, both in humanities. Went to Minnesota, had 3 sons. Will graduated from the college in 2002. Eric graduated from the college in 2010. Charlie doesn't walk or talk or see very well. He was born with profound disabilities, which led me at a very young age, as a young mommy, to start working with schools and try to figure out, how do we make schools that work for all kids? So I came to the job that I have, which is Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services in the U.S. Department of Education, through political advocacy. And I went back and got an MBA in Minnesota because when Charlie was diagnosed, I needed to do something that was comfortable for me. And being back in school was comfortable for me. And so my class in the MBA program gave me the Sue Swenson Memorial Speed Reading Award, because you'd buy your textbooks, and if you turned them in within the first week of the quarter, you got 90% of your money back. And that's about how much value I put into those textbooks, having a Chicago education. So anyway.
Nice.
I guess what I'm trying to tell you is I think the liberal arts education that you get here and the interdisciplinary understanding, the understanding that there are no problems that belong in one little silo, that is something that you will take with you everywhere you go. Every single thing I've done in my career has been interdisciplinary. Every single thing. And being able to ask questions across disciplines has been a core strength and a core reason why I came into DC and into politics. So I did every volunteer thing I could possibly do in local school, kids' school, state-based, every commission I chaired them in order. Then I was called to DC to do testimony. And you have to send, anybody testified in front of a congressional committee before? So you have to send the testimony
Trying to avoid it,
before. There's two kinds of testimony. One is where you work for the government, in which case you're the enemy. And one is if you're a citizen, in which case you're there. I was a citizen. You have to send it in advance. And when I came to do the testimony, all of the members of the committee were present. And Paul Wellstone, who was my senator, said he had gone to them and told them, you have to read this testimony. And everyone needs to come and hear this. And he told me, and I don't think he lies, but I think he was being really nice to me. He said, this is the best testimony I ever read. And that was my Chicago education. And that became the beginning of going out to DC to work for a year in the Senate as a fellow of the Kennedy Foundation, coming back a year later to work in the Clinton administration in developmental disability. Now, I hope none of you have the experience of having a child with severe or profound disabilities. Unlikely that that will happen to anyone in this room. Charlie's diagnosis is a 1 in 5 million occurrence. On the other hand, whatever happens to you in your life, not all of it, even if it seems negative, is negative. So you build on it and you create a career out of it, and that's what I did anyway.
That was awesome too.
I probably don't need the mic. I kind of feel like I'm in the company of the generals and I am the soldier. My name is Jessica Vandevussi. I was class of 94, biology. I am a classroom teacher. I started in Chicago. I actually was a rowing coach for an athletic program on the west side of Chicago, and their science teacher quit. And I thought, well, I have a biology degree from UC. I mean, it's science. I can teach this, right? And that was about 20 years ago. And that began my journey. I spent 7 years at Manly Career Academy on the west side, and then I moved to a charter school on the west side, North Lawndale College Prep. And then I left North Lawndale College Prep to help friends start a school on the south side, Urban Prep Academies for young men. And this past summer, after being there 7 years, I was given a job opportunity at Expeditionary Learning School in Colorado, which is an affiliate of Outward Bound. And so I thought that was a really valuable opportunity, and I left the Chicago area for the first time in 20 years to try something new and very different. But I am the classroom teacher, I think, here.
Yeah. And I taught for 10 years in Chicago. I'm from Montana, lived in Burton Judson, lived in Woodward Court, they don't know what that is. Yeah. It's underground.
Under the business.
Yeah, exactly. It's under a business school.
Does he want water?
And then, the woman I was dating at the time, her twin sister's ex-boyfriend was tutoring at a school out on the southwest side, and so they said, "Oh, you're kind of interested in education." I had done some political stuff in the summer, so I didn't think I wanted to write letters about legislation. I wanted to be involved in people's lives in a different way. So then I got into teaching. I ended up getting a job there. I started 3 days after, and I just would. The one quick thing I'll say is. Don't let anybody tell you that this work is just teaching. Don't let nobody in this room who came to the University of Chicago, who can think the way you can think, who has the intellectual and human power that you have, is going to just teach. You guys are going to get out and change this country and change the face of education for kids. And gosh darn it, if you want to do that, you should do that. And I think that's just, do it if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. Then then make some money and donate to the schools of the people in this room that are doing it.
Amen.
But run for school board.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but I think that absolutely, what the work that we're involved in is not just teaching. It's about transforming this country.
I'm Matt Stagner. I'm the director of Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, which is a social policy research center on 60th Street, affiliated with the university. I think partly I'm here to represent a broader view of education. We've got teachers and policymakers and principals, but I think I'd encourage you to think about education as also the social service enterprise and what's happening in communities and well beyond what's happening just within classrooms and school buildings. So I hope I can represent that perspective, as well as the research perspective that sadly education, I think, is behind a lot of other fields in its knowledge base. There's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of great people. We don't really know what always we should be doing, and the research enterprise is one of the things that's going to help us create a better education system over the next 20 years or in your lifetimes. I am a graduate of the college from 1981. I was a history major. As Sue would testify to and David Axelrod talked about, the idea that students would go get jobs was not something the university really concerned itself with back then.
Nor did we.
It's a chicken and egg. I'm not sure which came first. So all of my friends went off to graduate school. I picked up the LSAT book one night and thought, why am I doing that? I don't even know what law school is. I don't want to go to law school. And then I found out about public policy school. And since I didn't want to get a job, I went to get a master's in public policy, came back, and got a PhD at the Harris School, then spent 15 years in Washington, sometimes overlapping with Sue. I was in the Department of Health and Human Services, in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, and then at the Urban Institute, which is a research organization in Washington, and returned to Chapin Hall about 6 years ago. So I look forward to your questions.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shaz Rasul. I'm the director of the Neighborhood Schools program here at the University of Chicago. I'm a graduate of the college in '97. I was a sociologist. I came back later for computer science. So I tend to think of the world in terms of systems and processes and how people divide themselves. So you can look at any situation in terms of insiders and outsiders. And when we look at education, there are clear, every system creates insiders and outsiders very quickly. So in a funny way, my career has been about thinking about how can somebody outside the frame make an impact inside the frame. So I started out at the university doing the Neighborhood Schools program as a student, thinking about how a university student can help kids in the neighborhood improve their education. I went on to the Peace Corps, where I did work with teacher preparation, thinking about how outside resources that were outside of a country can help a country reformat and retrain their teachers. I came back here to work on a technology project where the idea was how can we bring these technology resources into the hands of teachers so that they can have modern tools and support to keep up with a really fast-changing world. And right now, I'm at NSP. We're working on this enterprise of thinking through what social benefit should a world-class university provide for people who are proximate to it. Our motto, let knowledge grow from more to more, and so human life be enriched. I don't want that human life to be enriched later. I don't want it to happen when you graduate or years from now. I want it to happen now, during the process of your time here. And so that's what we're trying to do here. How can we connect these resources? How can we connect you guys to real people in the here and now?
Fantastic. Isn't this an awesome panel? Like, it's really good. So we'll take some questions. I think there's the general kind of questions about how the university impacted our work or that sort of thing, but let's take a couple and kind of see where we're at with the crowd. Who's got one? Say your name, please, and what else do we want to know about question askers? Do you guys want to know concentrations?
Where they're from.
Where they're from? Okay, we want to know concentration and where you're from, please.
Okay, my name is Milad. I'm a political science major with a human rights minor, and I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. And my question was, how particularly for the classroom teacher, I wanted to know how you develop the practical classroom skills from your UChicago education. I know our schooling is a lot more, like theoretical and scholarly, and how do you use those skills in the classroom?
I want to turn that over to Jessica, but Millette gets a Noble Street College prep.
So how do we practice, I guess?
Shirts.
Right. That was really good. So it got me distracted now. The ADHD kicks in. All right. So the practice of being in the classroom, teaching is a physically and emotionally demanding endeavor. All right, and there's really no matter where you teach, who you teach, or what you teach, it is those two things. And I think what at University of Chicago, some of the things that I learned, it was somewhat of a psychological boot camp. You are trained to be tired, and you read, and so you build up that endurance. But at the same time, I think you learn how to look at problems in a multitude of ways. And so the classroom, your students, their condition, the content you see, these are all sides of this big Rubik's Cube that's never going to be really solved in any one particular way. So I think, reading of primary documents, questioning things in a very open and honest way, always knowing that it's an ongoing process. It is an ongoing process. There's no final answer. There's no stasis in education. And I think coming out of the U of C, that's part of the classroom experience for me. There's no one answer. There's no one way to answer a problem. And you always have to be looking for insight from yourself, insight from the people around you, and looking for that mentorship piece, and then also mentoring at the same time. And I think there's no easy way your first year in the classroom, your second year, there's just no easy way to do that. That's just part of the indoctrination into education. But I felt prepared for that.
And Ben, you taught for how many years?
I taught in Spain for a year in Madrid. Pulled out teaching. I was the American English speaker. The fancy school's got a British English speaker. I'm going there. I also teach middle school Spanish now. It's a twice a week enrichment thing. I think building on Jessica's points and talking to what Shaz talked about a moment ago, while I was at Chicago, we started something called the Maroon Tutor Program, which was getting varsity athletes involved in inner city education. So going out to some of the schools, and it was in a tutoring capacity, which I know some of you do, including a young lady I was staying with at the lunch table. Seeing what populations go through, seeing what affects their lives, understanding what surrounds them, and a poignant thing that I still carry with me in working with students in a school just off of King Drive. You can see the beautiful skyline of downtown, but they'd never been downtown, although they lived on King Drive on the south side. So it's the opportunity gap, it's the achievement gap, it's the awareness gap, but bringing that knowledge with you to public policy, whether you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be advocating for people, to the classroom, trying to know people's lived experiences are very different, and you need to understand that in order to help them be the best version of themselves that they can be. And that's what we try to do in the classroom.
And I would just add, kind of from a practical thing, right now, I know that you're probably, you're going to hear a lot of alums say, it's so much better for you guys than it was for us, and it is so much better for you than it was for us.
The college used to be really hard.
No, it's still hard. Ooh, man, Sue just, man.
I told you I have two sons who are alums.
Right. But in terms of options for people, I think our country is starting to get a little bit smarter about trying to get people like yourselves in front of kids, and I think other countries are much better at that than ours is. And so, Teachers for Chicago, great. UTEP, we're going to hear from Dale in a minute at the end, and UTEP, phenomenal. Teach for America, phenomenal. Like great places and programs where you can get some of that that actual teaching like knowledge and skill. I mean, since I had just kind of like wandered into a school, I went to one of the first places I went was to Seminary Co-op. I bought The Skillful Teacher. I bought Bill Ayers' books. I bought I bought books. And I just read them, and I'm like, all right, well, okay. And then and one thing I just want to make sure that you understand, and I don't know if this is true of the first year of other careers, but you will cry during your first year of teaching, and you will probably cry in front of your kids. And that's like, and I'm from Montana, like I'm tough, but I'll get weepy sometimes if I have to, and especially if you're in a situation where you're just totally getting worked by people smaller than you, right? And so that I mean, but the thing about it is like if you can slog back and forth and get up at like 6 a.m. and slog across the Midway or 7 a.m. or whatever, and like if you can do UFC, you can teach, like because you're mentally tough. You guys are like tough as nails, right? And that's what you need. You need perseverance. But then also the last thing I'll throw out on that is no matter where you learn, the thing about teaching that I think people gets undersold is that it is intellectually challenging work. It is intellectually challenging. You have to be able to, like, a lot of people can understand hard things, but they can't break it down and build it back up again. And teachers have to not only understand the thing, but understand why other people don't understand it.
Times 30.
Right, yeah. So anything else to add on the sort of like the nuts and like kind of those pieces?
If I could add just one quick point, in terms of a unique UChicago quality, embrace the quirkiness. If you're going into a field where you're basically in show business, every day you have an audience and you have to sell a product, which is whatever knowledge you're trying to get. If you're into funny bow ties, your kids will love funny bow ties. If you're a principal, the kids love to choose my ties each day. Building that personal relationship, that connection, and part of that is who you are. So that they'll say professionalism, you dress up, you do certain things. The research supports that, but the research also supports, like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Education is that individual connection. So whoever you are, this is a field where you can really embrace that and build on that. And in my case, we have some little redheads in preschool. I have a bunch of mini-me's too. So it's something that's really fun, and you can embrace yourself.
I was just going to paraphrase Tom Hanks and say there's no crying in research.
What if you don't get published? Do you cry then?
You send it to another journal.
Matt always gets published, so he doesn't know. Fair enough. Another question. There you go.
T-shirt.
Now, do we know? Are there more shirts? There are a few more, but I don't have a million more. I have a few more. Yeah. Sir.
So my name's Nate. I grew up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I am majoring in chemistry and psychology. And my question to all of you is, just like what advice would you have for us is in terms of things that we can get involved with now to set ourselves up to make a difference?
Roz is going to start with that.
Yeah, so I'll take the easy one. So obviously NSP gets you into a classroom right away. Splash and Cascade are programs where you can be creative and sort of see what part of yourself really resonates with young people. But in general, I think the advice I'd have is don't wait for later. I mean, if you want to walk down this path, it's a very demanding path. So start now and figure out if it really does get your battery charged up.
I'm not sure this is a direct answer to the question, but it's something that I think we would all argue is that there's no one right way to enter a field like this. There are hundreds of doors, and the important thing is to figure out whether that's a field you want to enter and go through one of those doors. And none of you will probably be teachers who work at the same school for 45 years or work in the same institution. You'll change several times, as all of us have done. So don't panic about going through one of those doors just because it doesn't seem like that's the ultimate door. Get into the field, and then it's easier to move from one point within to another.
Sue and then Jessica. Yeah.
And not to terrify you, but in the United States, teaching is part of the democratic process. It's the student-centered classroom that recognizes the individuality of each learner and the strengths and skills that each learner brings, no matter what challenges they might have, is a really important part of developing a whole social system where people have the courage to stand up and ask questions and demand more and question the system. You remember Tocqueville? You remember towards the end of Tocqueville, he says the future of the American democracy depends on the education of mothers, because it's mothers who will teach the children to ask questions. And if you can do nothing else as a teacher, teaching the child to ask questions is really critical. I would encourage you to start thinking that a school is not a place where all of the little learners will be just like you. They're not all going to be really smart at the stuff you're smart at, and they're going to have language challenges or disability challenges or other kinds of diversity. I think sometimes disability is a window into brilliance for some of these kids. So think about that diversity aspect of it and how you use the classroom to help develop this country for the next generation. It really is very different here from the pedagogy, even in Europe, in my experience.
All right. If you're a chemist, please teach. Because part of the problem, if you look at what the NSTA says about science instruction and you go to the math organizations, is that we don't have scientists teaching science. And I'm not trying to disparage educators who've gone into science instruction through their education programs. But there's a direct correlation between that content piece that the teacher has and the amount that can be learned by that classroom. And then my other thing about preparation is on a separate note, if you're involved in sports, coaching is an amazing opportunity to learn about instruction. I think thinking about how football players learn plays and they practice and you correct and then they practice and you correct, that's very similar to the classroom in a lot of ways.
Well, and just super practically, get in front of kids as much as you can, and even if it's classroom visits, right? So you're visiting classrooms. There's a bunch of us teaching and working in schools that are in the book for, it used to be called CAPS, the career advancement. We're all in the book. People come and visit me every year. Tutor, of course, but just getting in front of kids and trying to figure out how to help each individual kid, and that's what you got to do. I mean that. So are you ready for another one? Okay, let's go.
Corner. The side of the room.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been.
Name. Yeah.
So I'm Ione Barrows. I'm a second year in the college studying history and possibly public policy.
And where are you from?
And I'm from the Boston area.
Okay.
And so I've been teaching with MSP in Woodlawn and been reading a lot about schools in economically distressed areas with students who come from difficult backgrounds. And so one question I've had is, so you can come up with programs, after school programs, and all kinds of things to help out kids who don't have opportunities at home. But where do you draw the line between giving kids opportunities and sort of taking them away from their parents? And I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but where do you, how much is too much intervention in kids with troubled backgrounds?
Sorry. Yeah. Wow, this is like a super. Of course, now we're okay, everybody, we need careers. Now let's just dig into the work. All right. So, who wants to start with that? Because that's Go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
From where I sit, we're a Catholic school, so we get to be engaged with families and with youth on levels that public schools don't, and frankly can't by law. So when we talk about how much involvement or engagement, for us, there's no limit. For us, we get to be at their baptism, we get to be at their confirmation, we get to be at their parents' funeral. We're there through every single step of the way. I think in education, you'll find, for us, we have pre-K days, so that means I have 3-year-olds to 14-year-olds. We go through the entire range of human emotions and human situations every single day. And being able to connect with that for us is who we are and how we define ourselves. So I think it depends upon the context in which you're engaging with the youth.
This is your
Yeah.
life's work.
And I don't have an answer for it yet. But the one thing which I think a lot of people thinking about teaching don't recognize is that in almost every state, possibly in every state, you're a mandated child abuse reporter. So at one level, at one extreme, one answer is you really have to pay attention to that. And if you see situations where children are unsafe, you are required by law to report it. The problem is that that's a gray area, and you're often only having a small window into a child's life. So I think all of the panel and everybody in the field would say it's a huge struggle to think about the role of parents and that tension between taking kids who are not in good circumstances and giving them a better place to be inside the school, but also wanting them to take something back home from that, as well as to engage the parents wherever possible. So I guess I can't answer the question, but I would say if you want to go into the field and if you want to teach in those challenging circumstances, you just have to recognize that you're going to be struggling with that every day, and that there isn't a right answer. It's something you hope you can reach out to your colleagues and mentors to work with.
Something we hope for from parents on the special ed side is that we will have teachers who will be able to reach out to parents to help them understand that the role of the school is not to cure the disability, but rather to teach the child accommodations so that he or she can live a full life. And most parents who have a kid with a disability want a cure first, and so they look at the IEP as a chance for therapy and intervention, and could you please make the autism go away, for example. So this is different from what you're asking, but it's similar in some ways, because one thing we want really great teachers to be able to do is to engage with parents to help them even understand the basic message that their son or daughter can thrive and have a wonderful life with a disability, not in spite of a disability. So that's one thing. But I also want to make one other comment. If you're teaching really bright kids who have really economically oriented families, I assure you their families will be really ticked off if you get their kid interested in history instead of day trading. So there's a way that teachers always take children away from parents. And we shouldn't say that only poor children should be left with their poor parents. We should have the courage of teaching that really reaches in and allows every child to come out and meet us. So.
And and then Raz is gonna finish. Is that all right, Raz, or do you want to
Shaz.
go now? Shaz. Oh, I'm sorry. Man, gosh darn it. All right, sorry, Shaz. Do you want to? Why don't you go?
Yeah, let me
Yeah,
just
sorry.
say that
Shaz.
you're asking.
Shaz Razul, and I had like a total. Sorry, how bad? Yeah. Let me explain it to you in front of everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking the modern question right now. I mean, I think all of education reform is struggling with this question about what changes in the school building can do independent or of poverty in the neighborhoods. And I don't think that there's a clear answer to this. And for those of you who are looking to get into this profession right now, this is the argument, the central issue that's sort of being played out. The policy folks in the room, I mean, you're gonna make decisions about what the school buildings look like and what kinds of resources are going into the communities, and if we're thinking about these things sort of in an integrated way, or if we're thinking about these things in a disjointed way. So Yeah.
So, I mean, and then I think there's a couple other points that want to come up, but I want to throw out, so I didn't tell a ton about Noble. I'll tell real quickly, 92% of our students are free or reduced lunch. Each year, 95% of our students go to college. We've got 4 graduates from, thank you. We've got 4 graduates from UC, 4 from Northwestern. We're trying to just, let's keep going UC. But we've got 2 kids at Yale right now. These are all first generation in their family to go to college. 2 kids at Yale, 1 at Princeton, 1 at Stanford. We've got 7 graduates from Carleton. We get 96% attendance every day. We're a Chicago public school that is working for kids in some pretty profound ways. One of the things that, and we also have struggles, so I want to be clear about that. But one of the things that we do is each teacher has an advisory of about 20 students, and that the advisory is named after you. So my advisory when I taught at Noble, they were the Olsons, and so I was like, they're wandering around the school like, you got my name on you now, so let's get together on this and figure out how it's going to work, right? So but then I was the first point of contact with parents, and I speak a little Spanish myself, and so was speaking a lot with parents. And I really see my role as an educator as I serve my students' parents and my students. And so, I know you didn't mean it this way, but it made me uncomfortable, this idea of taking away from parents, assuming that, because there's when you get to know our kids' parents, there's so much love and hard work and effort and thoughtfulness and kindness and in the toughest situations, like our parents, go through lives that are as hard as it is to be a University of Chicago undergrad, I'm joking, harder, right? Yeah. So, and they come through shining every day and put food on the table. And so I think, there's going to be, it's a constant conversation and discussion about what that means. But I mean, a couple of examples, there were families facing a number of students facing serious crises, post-traumatic stress disorder, some different concerns. When my social worker, my colleague who's our social worker, we were chatting one day and we're like, man, wouldn't it be great if we could get a truckload of therapists to just at the end of the day, just unload all the therapists, and a bunch of the teachers could talk to the therapists, and a bunch of the kids could talk, we could all talk to the therapists. Yeah, right, and us, all of us, right? So then we ended up finding this grant where now we have 4 therapists who spend, just about, a day each, and it's paid for, and so pretty phenomenal work with families and kids happening there in a profound way. So I think that might be an example.
I would like to comment just to make the question, Ione's question, a little bit more difficult, in the good U of C tradition. Especially for you legal folks and public policy folks, when you think of the needs of students, most education policy talks about inner city education. But let's talk about rural education, talk about rural poverty, talk about Appalachia. My school is predominantly upper middle class Caucasians. We're a mile from Lake Michigan. I can tell you we had a mother of 4 died of a gunshot wound on December 11, and I was there with the family telling the 4 children that their mother was dead. Dealing with every sort of situation, there's not one policy fix, but you need to think about every possible context, including geographical. It's not just inner city Chicago, it's Upper Mountain Appalachia. Where is whatever policy you're making, does it fit the context?
I knew this was going to be a good panel. Other questions? I know we had way in the back.
Geometric progression.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. I'm Kayla. I'm a second-year biology and comparative human development major from New York City. And one of you briefly mentioned research. I know it's none of your specialties necessarily, but I was wondering if you could elaborate on sort of how that goes into education, or what areas in particular need to be improved on.
Okay. Fast shirt, everybody, but keep the questions coming.
Oh,
Almost.
So Chapin Hall is primarily a research center. We are not primarily do research on a lot of areas that relate to education, out of school time, the kind of community situations that were referred to earlier. The field of education research, I think, is has really turned itself around in the last few years and is possibly one of the few good things that happened during the Bush II administration. There was a creation of a federal agency called the Institute for Educational Sciences. And the idea, the question, which I think is the right question, is why do we have a National Institute of Health that pours billions of dollars into improving healthcare through research, and we don't have something for the education field that's similar to that? Because as much as we have had generations of great teachers and principals, again, the field doesn't know everything that it needs to know about these context issues that Ben raised, or even just what is the best third grade math curriculum. You have a situation that's sort of similar to defense contractors with people pushing a curriculum because they will make money off of it and not really thinking, is this the best thing for the kids? So the research world of education has become much more rigorous over the last decade, and I think will continue to be. I think it's attracting better scholars into the field, and the future is quite bright for it. And there is much more of a push in education than there used to be for evidence-based practice. That's a really tough challenge. It isn't that somebody can do one study and find out that something works and now everybody does that. It may not work in Appalachia, it may work on the south side of Chicago, or vice versa. It may work in some circumstances with a certain type of teacher and not with another. So there's a lot to be learned, and I think a lot of money going into education research and a lot of opportunities, even at the BA level, to work at some of those organizations for a while. You can't really have a career in education research with just a BA, but there are a lot of good opportunities to work for 2 to 3 years, see if that entices you, and then go back and get a master's or an advanced degree.
And Shaz, you may be able to speak to this more, but I know it's certainly, so they put the university help me get the acronym right, the
UEI.
University
Urban
Urban Education Institute, yeah, and Sarah Stolinga, who's sometimes on this panel, what takes people to come visit. She's a UC undergrad too. They're doing great ed research, and there's people out there and at Chapin Hall as well that are doing great ed research, and it's important. I think there's ways for you guys to get in touch with those folks as well. Did I explain that?
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll help you link to whoever you need afterwards. So.
Yeah.
I think too, the disability policy work that we're doing is leading to some different models, and we are challenging our researchers to think beyond evidence-based practice and begin thinking about practice-based evidence. Mm-hmm. So we want to build big data systems, we want to build open data, we want to create more opportunities for people who can really manage research at a macro level, and really thinking about not just which third grade math is best, but for whom is it best, and how do you tell the difference between the kids it works for and the kids it doesn't work for, and what does the teacher think about actually delivering it? Is it useful? Is it not useful? Is it problematic? We're not there yet. But I think we'll get there before we build a Death Star.
And I think that's a piece as a practitioner that's always, as I meet and chat with people who are thinking about which ways to go, I do think there's something to be said for having some time in front of kids and really thinking about what that means and learning and pushing yourself in that way. And so these programs, that's part of the TFA thing or UTEP or other places where you can step into the research world, and I think there is a lot of skepticism from schools about research that's done in a kind of vacuum that's not contextual, and so it's really refreshing to hear you say that too, Sue. Yeah. Any other thoughts on research? Oh, questions. Okay. Now we got the pump primed. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
So I have a question, broader question on policy.
Name and what your question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm Rachel, bio major, human rights minor. I'm from Georgia.
Minors.
So I have a question.
Can I ask, how many kids have a human rights minor? I gotta see hands. Oh, that's interesting. Thank
How
you.
many kids have a minor?
Never had a minor.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have
we-
it.
that-
Yeah, we didn't have
that's new
minors.
for all of us.
My
College
uncle.
is really hard now.
My uncle was a minor. It's true.
Are you from Anaconda?
Yes. My wife's family's from Anaconda. Yeah. I'm sorry. Never mind. Yes, Anaconda. So you had a question.
Rachel.
From Georgia.
Yeah.
Human rights minor.
So about the more policy side, the legislation raised to the top, No Child Left Behind, as well as other issues that have been talked about, like merit pay or teacher evaluations. I was wondering from kind of every level, from a research level, how does that work? How did that get implemented? How it might affect special education? How does it make it more difficult to be a classroom teacher or not? And as well as how it's kind of maybe different for private or religious schools versus public schools, like the whole range, I guess.
So can you just stand up and say booyah to everybody else who wanted to have a question? Like that's the end of all questions. You just asked every question. No, I'm teasing. But so broadly, government and policy, how it affects our work. Yeah. Who wanted Jessica? Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of the, I'll talk a little bit about, nickel B and merit pay and things of that nature. A lot of times policy becomes more of a stumbling block in the classroom than it does become an aid. And typically the way that, these policies become managed is, the administrators have a hard job because they have to demonstrate that the policies are being implemented in their schools, and they have to give evidence that these are being done, and they have to do
We
this.
smile and nod.
Yeah, and they have to do it all without interfering with the teacher's priority of teaching children. And a lot of times, in the few schools I've been, a lot of this turns into paperwork. All right, it becomes paperwork on the part of the teacher, just to manage and monitor and databases and numbers and things of that nature. Merit pay. Anytime people are like, we need to use a business model, and I'm like, it's not a business. While good management skills and good people management skills are necessary to run an effective school, we don't get to pick our students. In most cases, they come to us with what they bring us, and we have to educate them the best way we know how. And ideally, we have policies that facilitate that process. But I find that most of them just create work that takes away from my ability to be an effective classroom teacher. And over the years, I've just gotten better at managing it and getting, undergraduates to come help me do it while I teach. I don't know if that's how I'm supposed to answer that.
But education is a uniquely decentralized policy area, and even though the national government is more involved in it than it's ever been, and there's probably that trend, it's a really not only local policy issue, but then school by school, classroom by classroom, and that complicates policies, because policies almost by definition are one size fits all. And so the types of things Sue was talking about correcting policies to help them be more nuanced, to fit a wider range of children and situations, is necessary, but we're really not very far along that path.
18,000 or 19,000 school districts in the United States, ranging in size from one charter school to LA Unified or Chicago Public Schools, or you can imagine the difference in the skill that the school board brings to each of these 18 or 19,000 school districts. We're not allowed to write curricula, so there's a federal prohibition of the Department of Education writing curricula or promoting curricula. So you can see some of the limitations that we have.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and just for fun, trot on the whole, sacred states' rights thing of America, because in some ways, this fractured, of like each state does its own. So now finally, there's this Common Core thing coming out. We're gonna have a set of standards, but guess what? All right, so we're gonna give you guys are all states now. All right, so we are telling you what standards the kids have to learn, right? But you get to make your own test.
Right.
So like Ireland's test is super hard. And then none of the kids learned it, but Hamid's test is super easy, and then all it hits is 100% are passing it. And everybody's like, "Oh, great! What are you doing, Hamid?" And he was like, "We're great at teaching here, right?" But he just made an easy test. And so here's one thing. I'll even go a next step because it's you guys and we're all family here. I think in some ways that what this is it gives our country an excuse to treat our citizens unequally. It gives, what if, let's just go to the same people who think there should be every different state doing its own thing and say, okay, well, now we're going to have different money for every state. Or we're going to have different, levels of food safety for every state. It's crazy. In other countries, there's a standard for what you need to learn, and educators are held to that standard. And I think that the hiding behind this states' rights thing means that people can allow racism to exist in a really profound way.
It's our poorest children that are taking the brunt of all of this. And I think the one thing I've seen in the last 12 years is education's become increasingly politicized. There's a hell of a lot more ideology in all of the conversation, and it is our poorest children that right now, if you look at the news, every major city has a school closure debate. Which is all around how do we save money that we are supposedly spending on effectively our poorest children, and I think this is the world we're in right now, and I think there's an opportunity. I'm not telling you how to be political or what your politics should be, but this is the time where if you have politics, that you should get involved, because this is when a lot of things are being decided.
I wasn't kidding about running for school board. If you can't run for school board, go observe the school board meetings. They're open meetings. If you can't do that, start storing up some political experience and take a run for Congress. There's nobody in this room who wouldn't improve the Congress just by your presence.
You have to be 25.
You have to be old enough. Once you're old enough.
You have to be old enough to be a principal, and then you can run.
I would say that how does everything for the Catholic system, the private systems, in my diocese, there is no more powerful, influential person than the building level principal. In other dioceses, the superintendent will be powerful. In other places, the bishop will have control. But in each state, it also depends on how they're built into the public system. In Indiana, we take all the Indiana assessments. We are held to all the Indiana standards. In Massachusetts, the Catholic systems are forbidden from taking the public assessments. They take different tests. So it all depends on how the accreditation works. I'll keep saying it again and again. If the policy doesn't fit the context, it becomes the burden that Jessica was talking about. It can't just be more paperwork. The amount of time I spend on paperwork as an administrator, that's time taken away from supporting teaching and learning. Yeah. But from a public policy standpoint, you need the macro level data to be able to make those decisions, and I'm the reporter. So you have to have a balance going both ways. And going even back to the research question a minute ago, every teacher is a researcher, but so is every principal, but so is every education committee and school board. So there has to be this flow of information every which way. And the problem with education in particular, 3 million teachers, there are so many hands in that research pool that is the data accurate. That becomes the public policy nightmare.
Well, and I would say I'm in the charter world, and happily. Yes, we have the ideas. We've traded more accountability for more autonomy. And so, we follow state and federal laws, but we don't have to follow every, and I apologize if there's anybody who's close to a CPS bureaucrat here in this room, but we don't have to follow every twist and turn of Chicago Public Schools policy, right? But we do have to follow state and federal laws. So that my job really, and yes, I serve children and parents, but I also serve great teachers, because my job is to, like, when you just gave me the chills when you said, paperwork's a big part of your job. That should, like, to me, I should be taking that burden off you, but it's
who I work for now, I don't do as much paper.
yeah. Next one.
Can I add one quick thing?
Sure,
If anybody really is thinking about a political career, every member of Congress and every senator has local offices throughout the states.
Yeah.
Go there, get an internship, answer the phones, develop skill. You'll be amazed at the questions that citizens have that they're bringing to their member of Congress to have them solved. You can develop tremendous knowledge of a district just by working in a district office for somebody, and you don't have to go to DC to do it. Although going to DC is probably your next career move from that. So.
And we've got Axelrod on campus now, so let's get some education policy discussed in that institute.
Yeah, exactly, right?
My name's Noreen. I'm a second-year linguistics major. Policy-wise, are we doing anything right? And and what countries, in your knowledge, are doing stuff right, and what are they doing right?
So one quick answer to that, and it goes back to what I said before about democracy. Singapore has the highest test scores in the world, and I heard the president of the Singapore school system on NPR after those test scores came out, and he said, I would give anything to have a school system like the United States where kids actually learn how to think and innovate. And my kids are only learning how to memorize and spit it back to me, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I would say, I would actually, I would say one quick thing in defense of No Child Left Behind, which is, I can't believe I just said that out loud.
No child's behind left.
Right, exactly, yeah, right. But I think one thing that it did in a lot of districts is it created some sense of urgency around, and so we use a growth model. We use a standardized test. We also measure. We also learn about our kids in other ways than standardized tests. But we have a pre and a post at the beginning of and end of each year. The kind of teaching that our teachers are doing is so much more advanced than what I was doing, and it's so much. It's more. Now here's a phrase. So when you say, I'm glad. Like when you hear somebody say data driven, I prefer student driven, data informed, because I think what I see our teachers doing is really using information about how kids learn to help kids learn more. So I would say we're doing a ton of things right. I think that part of it too is our chance out here in the world of field and say to you guys who are smart and thoughtful, come join us because it's a mess. Because we know you guys chose UC because it's hard and crazy, and we're trying to show you the ed world is hard and crazy too. So come and join us. But I also think there are a lot of things that are going right.
There are very few places in the world where 100% of the children have the right to public education.
Yeah.
Well, and I recently relocated to Colorado, and Colorado's districts are very different. And in some of our most economically challenged communities in Colorado Springs have access to the best performing school districts. So what is happening in other urban centers further to our east isn't happening in the state of Colorado. I mean, they are struggling, their scores are low, kids are struggling with the same issues, but the way they district the schools was so that there was a certain amount of equity and access, and it's showing up in other social ways. If that makes sense.
And it's already been said, but I'll be the second one to say that there were some good things about No Child Left Behind. I think the idea that school systems need to be accountable for children learning is the right idea. The problem is we're probably not measuring the right thing, and we don't have the right reward and accountability system in there. But at least now that's not really debatable. We can't just watch systems fail and make excuses about that. So it really is in the next generation that then we have to figure out, well, what does it mean to succeed? How would we measure that? How would we create the right accountability system? So I think we won't go back away from that, but hopefully it will improve.
just a question out to everybody. Who feels like they owe the fact that they got to go to U of C to a teacher in high school? Who feels like you owe it to a teacher in elementary school? You know? Who, and who thinks they had horrible teachers all the way through and you're mad about that, right? Like, but at least there was one or two, one or two people, right? Like, and I think that one or two people in your career that really influence your life, and that's probably part of the reason why you're sitting here. It's certainly true of a lot of us. Another question. Wow, this is really great. Yeah, sir.
All right, I'm John Kaplan. I'm a second-year philosophy major from Barrington, Illinois. And my question is about difficulties in teaching different demographics of students. So I've had the unique opportunity in the past maybe 6 months to teach 4th through 6th graders philosophy, once through Northwestern University's Center for Talent Development. So extremely affluent, gifted kids in an amazing environment at a university. And I loved that experience, and I found kids very receptive to my teaching, and I found that really rewarding. And now what I'm doing at U of C is a similar program called Winning Words that does philosophy in local schools to the same age group. And it's a lot more challenging, it's a lot more exhausting, it's not as personally satisfying for me. So looking forward, in terms of teaching, there's that tough route where you can really say that you're changing a kid's life, and doing things like Teach for America. And then there's this cushy route of teaching at prep schools and privileged summer programs and things. And I almost feel guilty for preferring the latter. And I'm wondering if you've had that experience where if you feel like you're contributing equally to both groups.
Well, and I wonder how you help prepare people, right? Because don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with the baseline. All kids need certain amounts of attention and support in order to learn, no matter where you're coming from. So just walking into that world to do that kind of work is a positive to begin with. I think that you're absolutely right. The different situations and different environments are demanding in different ways, and I don't think anyone should feel bad if they don't think that they have the desire or capacity to do certain kinds of work. I think that's,
I generally think, though, that, and maybe as being at a Catholic school, Ben, you must feel the same way. I also would say that I think people should generally feel bad, period, having grown up Catholic. But that's yeah.
It's a righteous bad.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm with you, Shazan, not necessarily about that thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I would say, though, too, one of the things that UTEP does, one of the things that other places do, are teach you the skills. It's actually about skills.
Yeah.
So you can learn the skills to make that classroom that you're at now much more like the one that you were at last summer, and it's totally doable. And I think there's also building communities and environments where, come and see us at Noble Street, and you're going to see a lot of students who grew up in less advantaged spaces learning in ways that your kids at Northwestern were learning. So I think there's some pieces there. I also would encourage, if you love helping people learn, then help people learn, right? We're not gonna judge you, unless we think it would be funny. But then we're not gonna judge you. Yeah, I mean, I think what we want you to do is go out and find what makes your heart beat fast, right? What makes you feel excited about the world. And it's absolutely important that students who are super gifted are getting fantastic teachers, just like it's important that. Yeah.
If you're teaching really smart kids who are going to grow up and become LIBOR traders, how to use philosophy to overcome the ethical constraints of their work, that's bad. And I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I make a joke, I'm most serious.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that Wall Street, just before this crash, had hired very large numbers of people who had engineering as a background. And engineers are taught that their particular science does not admit of ethics, as Aristotle said. Even a kid with a business background is taught that there are ethical limitations to what they're doing. So, I mean, I think be true to your discipline. And if you're going to teach philosophy, teach it full bore to everybody who's going to be operating, and make sure they understand that it's not an art that they learn so that they can weasel out of stuff. I mean, I'm dead serious about that.
Just from personal experience, I grew up in the country in a place called Wheatfield Township. It wasn't even a metropolitan area. Didn't have a post office or anything. And I moved from there to the south side of Chicago, and you could imagine my culture shock that, you know, one day we're cutting corn and the next day I'm like getting my tour of Hyde Park, and I'm just, you know, wow, this is a whole new world. But there was a book written by Delpit and Perry, other people's children, and I think that you learn that, you know, there's this human condition that we all suffer from, I guess is the way of putting it. But the more you spend time in the community, see, you're not just teaching a child, you are teaching a child in their context, and to do that you have to join them in their context. And I think once you immerse yourself in the community you teach in, and your children and their families and their neighbors, and, you know, I had kids who I'd go to their house and they'd be like, hey, Ms. V. And it's just like you become part of that community. And so you're not the outsider kind of coming into this different demographic. And I think in Chicago, after moving away from Chicago, demographics is just, Chicago has its own set of crazy social problems and whatnot. You know, they can talk more about that. But that in and of itself, if you can just become a member of the community you are in and gain their trust and honor them and their families and their communities, then this issue of, hey, we come from different walks of life, works its way out. Because it's a trust. It's just, you're new, I'm new, we need to trust each other, and then I can teach you.
Yeah, I'd like to make that question more difficult in two ways. One is
That kid.
It's true. One part would be, I've worked in I'm still very young, so I don't have the resume everybody else has. I've worked in a couple of different demographic populations. In the wealthier populations, I've had more quote-unquote latchkey kids than in my impoverished populations. Because you have children whose both parents work, what does that child go home to? So it's you know, thinking of the needs that they pose. Another part, and this is a good part of building on the No Child Left Behind discussion, in the state of Indiana, they've implemented the growth model as part of accountability. If you thought teaching those upper class, upper middle class kids was easy, were you actually teaching them? The growth model says that upper middle class Caucasian demographics are going to pass. At my school, we are a low growth school. That means we are not a successful school at this time. Of course, we have a 91.6% passing rate. We have the highest passing rate in our history, but are we being effective in meeting those students' learning needs? The answer is, at this time, we are not, even though everybody passes the test, even though everybody gets everything that's presented. So what is the rigor that the teacher brings to the growth model to make sure you're meeting that kid's learning needs? And that's a whole other level of complexity, and that might make your job a whole lot more difficult if you have the same population again.
And I would just throw out there too, you know, that if the job of education, I mean, we think about this a lot, like what are schools for, like and who are schools for, right? So like if the job of education is to get the kids prepared to be just grist for the mill, like for the capitalist, like, you know, rat race, right? Then you got it, like it's done. Your kids in Northwestern were in great shape, like, oh, we got it, right? But if it's actually part of the reason why you guys came to the U of C, you know, isn't because Yale put you on the wait list. It's because, you know, it's because you chose a place that was about development and
The
intellectual
life of the
growth.
mind.
The life of the mind, exactly. You know, and so that approach to what teaching in schools is about is kind of back to what I was saying with you're not going to be just a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Wherever you go, you're going to be the person who's questioning and pushing and asking interesting ideas and flipping things on their head, and that's what we need. I think we might have time for a couple more. Yeah. I think you had your hand up a couple times. Yeah.
Oh. Hi, my name is Sahiba. I'm from Los Angeles and I'm studying fundamentals in economics. And I'm interested in your perspective on how much leeway an educator has in doing things their own way. Like, so for example, like if you're a science teacher and you want to teach science in a particular way, or like if you were a math teacher and you wanted to introduce proofs into your curriculum, or if you're a humanities teacher and most humanities education is taught from the perspective of like English literature, but you wanted to incorporate philosophy and gender studies and sociology and those sorts of things. How much control do you have over a classroom or a school for that matter?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
When I first started teaching, I was given a book, the case standards. I don't know if anyone in here remembers the case standards. And it was very prescribed. And now it's kind of swung to the other extreme. You know, now it's very much, these are the standards we need to meet. You kind of find your way to these standards in the classroom, however you see fit.
And I think, you know, if you're a person that loves learning like you do at UFC, you want to be in a place where you have autonomy and you're respected as a thinker and as a decision maker. Nobody here wants to go into a cookie cutter classroom and tell kids to fill in the dots and then that's it. That's not why you go into teaching. So are there places where you can go and be respected as a thinker and as an independent person? Absolutely there are. You could come to Noble Street and work with me. But I think that, you know, was I in that place in my first 2 years of teaching? No. Did I get there eventually? Yes, because you're starting to look and you're building up chops, and then you're getting to have more choices about where you go. I think we're last one, something totally different that nobody asked about. Who's got one? It's totally different. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name's Arlene. I'm a third year economics and public policy, and I'm from Kentucky. And I just wanted to end on a happy note. Do you guys have any specific stories or experiences that reflect what you find, most fulfilling and rewarding about your career in education?
So I don't have a career in education. One of the things I'll tell you in Washington, D.C. is if you meet a conservative, they'll say, oh, U of C, great conservative school. And if you meet a liberal, they'll say, oh, U of C, great liberal school. So I'm like slipstreaming around D.C. I want to say one more thing, and I think it relates to the last question. The Common Core is constructed on purpose to help you learn to talk to other people about what you're thinking and what you're doing, and outside of the classroom. So Richard McKeon was a guy who really put the Common Core together for Robert Maynard Hutchins. And I asked him once, how come you have all these books by dead white men? And he said, it's not important that they're books by dead white men. It's important that they're great books that will be likely to be used in other courses for other purposes, so that you can, at dinner in the dorm or wherever you are, have a real conversation with students who are studying the book from a different point of view, or the topic from a different point of view. And this skill of being able to have a conversation about something that's really deep and engaging and really important to you is a key skill for how you answer all of these questions as you proceed in your career. Nobody goes into teaching knowing what they're doing. They might think they know what they're doing. But the first thing that happens is they start to question, boy, am I really meant for this? Am I really going to be able? And having a community of people that you can talk to, whether it's a friend who's also doing Teach for America in a different place, or another teacher in the school that you find you can have a conversation with, that's the foundation that you're building with the Common Core, is the ability to do that across disciplines, across all kinds of other things. So identify a topic and bring it to a conversation and have that conversation. I think for me, that was the key gift of the college. It was the key thing that made the difference, all the difference.
I didn't know who Bob Marley was when I came to UC, and then I learned about him while I was at UC, and among
Which
the
core class?
yeah, exactly. Which core class? It was just extracurricular, but I think so. Then I got a student, Carly, who we were chit chatting about music and all that stuff, and her mom, difficult situation, moved her out to the suburbs. She calls after a couple months out there and says, "This is a number of years ago now." She says, "I'm gonna run away." What? We chatted about Bob Marley. We chatted about lots of things, right? Like just as Sue was saying, I've learned at U of C to engage with people, right, and engage with ideas. So Carly knew she could call me and call our social worker. She said, "I'm going to run away." I'm like, "What?" She said, "I'm going to run away so that I can get out of the big comprehensive high school I'm in out in the suburbs and come back to Noble Street and be with the teachers and the people that are." And so she did, and she lived on people's couches for the 2 years until there's a law that protects her and allows her to the students in temporary living situations and allows her to come back to school. She's in a liberal arts college right now. She's out doing liberal arts stuff out at Monmouth, and now she's decided that she's going to teach. And I think that that's one of them. There's a million stories like that. Yeah.
I'll say two quick stories. One is sort of a broader role as an educator I talked about before. On December, I mentioned this already, December 11th, the mother of 4 children in my school dies of multiple gunshot wounds, an unbelievable trauma for the children. And I'm there that night. I'm one of the people who tells them their mother is dead, along with the pastor. I introduced the coroner to the children. But how pervasive what we've been able to provide to that family over the years, after they were done, their first bout of crying, they became dehydrated. They couldn't cry anymore. They had calmed down, and we held hands and we started to pray. No, I'm going to cry. That was their choice. They wanted to pray. And the most rewarding moment was we said an act of contrition, we said the Our Father, we said the Hail Mary, and this is 11:40 at night, whatever it is. The kids are exhausted. Everybody's been crying, and one of them starts the grace before meal, and totally out of context, didn't fit the situation at all. But that was what she needed right then. This was a 5th grader who started it. That was what she needed then, and the influence that we had as a school and her faith had as a school, you saw it right there. Another 2 rewarding things. This is in the Catholic Church. The Holy Father proclaimed the Year of Faith. So we did a survey, and what does your faith mean to you? And 2 quick quotations. Again, how much the influence of a school and a teacher can have. A 3rd grade boy, he's the cool kid. He stands up in mass and says, "Heaven is where the angels sing and where all kind thoughts are." That's from a 3rd grader. A kindergartner stands up and says, "God makes the clouds fluffy." So just seeing how much of an impact you can have on what life that child will lead, and that's what Bill was saying. You're not just a teacher; you're changing the world.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Gates Scholarship. Yes, it's awesome. If you get a Gates Scholarship, anyone heard of it? You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Like
Okay.
10
Yeah.
people in here who got 'em.
Everything.
This place is like packed with Gates
I know.
scholars.
Well, last year, one of my students that I worked with and wrote the recommendations for got the Gates Scholarship.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
And I think that pretty much tops it.
That's free. That's paid for education all the way through PhD if you want it. Yeah, it's amazing.
Get it all.
Am I too old?
You have to be in high school.
So I think the key thing is that education is one of the few professions where you make profound differences in people's lives, even when you don't think you're making profound differences in people's lives. So let me say 2 things very quickly. So I got my start working with teachers in the Peace Corps, and to this day I have one teacher that continues to write me. I get these letters. I get these. I want money for a fence. Can you help me? We've got electricity now, and I mean, I knew I was working with him to rethink how we taught science, given the resources, given the new curriculum. But when I left Peace Corps, I didn't think that this was the guy that I'd made a big difference with. I mean, I thought I did other things, but he's the guy that reached out. He's like, oh, this did make a big difference. I am a different kind of teacher now, thanks to all the time we spent trying to figure out how to do things. And let me make my plug for NSP right here. Every quarter, at the end of every quarter, we get this barrage of reports from students and teachers about what happened this quarter, and they are filled to the brim with this one girl in my reading group who wasn't interested in anything. By the end of the quarter, I got her excited about this, and our staff, we get to see all of these little things. That little girl has no idea that her deciding to be interested in phonics made your day the way it did, to the point where you're gonna tell your boss that, hey, this is what we accomplished. And we get the same kind of feedback from teachers. This student brings this kind of energy that my school really needs or wants. So get involved in something. I'd like it to be NSP, but frankly, you need to get involved in something.
And another great opportunity, Dale from UTEP.
No, I'm fine. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Certainly.
So with all these
I have no
inspirational
happy
stories, we're all
thoughts.
ready to be classroom teachers now, right? I can tell you're just like ready to go. How many of you know or have heard of UTEP on campus? Yay!
Yeah.
Getting the word out. Urban Teacher Education Program. It's a 2-year master's and Illinois State certification program. There's 2 tracks available currently, so you can train to become train and become certified in elementary at K to 9, or secondary ed. Currently, we offer certification in math and bio. So 1 year of coursework on campus, 1 year of residency placements in classrooms in the city, and then 3 years of induction support in your classroom beyond the master's and certification. So a member of our staff helps support you in your classroom during your first 3 years of teaching. There are information cards going around. I gave some of them to you already. If you have them filled out and want to give them back to me, I'll be happy to take them from you. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan.